mail-order bride rejected for her size, until a lumberjack saw her as his ideal match. Elara had always known she was different. Even as a child, her height and strength set her apart from the other girls in her village. While they danced lightly across the fields, she ran with purpose, her steps firm and strong. When others struggled to lift a sack of grain, Elara carried it easily, smiling at their surprise. She never thought it made her strange, she just saw it as being herself. Now, in the sprawling frontier colony of Verdantia, those differences felt larger than ever. Verdantia was a new human settlement on a distant planet, a world of dense forests, towering trees, and skies streaked with golden clouds. Life here was hard. The air was thick with mist and the soil shifted after every rain. Machines helped the settlers, but they often failed, leaving humans to rely on their hands, minds, and each other. Elara had moved here with hope. Her skills as an engineer were respected, but her heart yearned for companionship. In the colony, finding a partner was not easy. Men and women were busy with survival, and romantic connections were rare. That was why she had signed up for the Interstellar Mail-Order Matchmaking Program, a service designed to pair humans across colonies, sometimes even across planets, to ensure the continuation of humanity in the scattered frontier worlds. She had imagined it would be simple. She sent her profile listing her skills, hobbies, and dreams. She included photographs, though none captured her fully. Some could not understand her size and strength. Some even saw it as intimidating. Days turned into weeks, then weeks into months. One by one, the letters arrived. Each envelope carried the same bitter words. Too tall, one read. Too strong, said another. Not what I imagined. The words were polite, almost gentle, but the sting was sharp. Each rejection was like a stone dropped on her chest. Elara folded the letters carefully and put them aside. She refused to let them see her cry. She told herself it was not her fault. The world was small, and people had expectations that did not fit everyone. But in quiet moments, she allowed herself to wonder why being strong and capable could feel like a flaw. The colony itself was alive with whispers. Some settlers were curious. "Did you hear about Elara?" they asked one another in the market square. She was rejected again. "They say she's too much." Elara heard them sometimes, though she pretended not to. She went about her work, fixing atmospheric sensors, repairing water systems, and maintaining the colony's energy grids. She loved her work, and she was good at it. But even in her successes, a quiet ache lingered, the ache of wanting to be understood and appreciated for exactly who she was. One morning, as the sun's golden light filtered through the thick canopy of Verdantia's forests, Elara walked to the colony's central workshop. She carried her toolkit, her steps measured and deliberate. Around her, settlers bustled, some preparing for the daily tasks of logging, farming, or maintenance. Above, massive timber beams swayed slightly in the breeze, supported by cables and pulleys designed to withstand Verdantia's unpredictable storms. Elara paused to watch a group of young apprentices struggling with a broken conveyor system. She smiled faintly. It reminded her of herself when she was younger, always trying, always learning, always proving that effort mattered more than size or shape. "Need a hand?" she called. The apprentices looked up, startled. Yes, ma'am," one replied. Elara knelt beside the conveyor and examined it. Her fingers worked quickly, unscrewing panels and reconnecting circuits with careful precision. Within minutes, the machine hummed back to life. The apprentices cheered, but Elara merely nodded. She didn't need applause. She needed understanding. Someone who saw her effort and her heart, not just her height or strength. That evening, after a long day of work, Elara returned to her small, modest home near the edge of the forest. She lit a small lamp and sat at her desk, opening the final envelope she had received that week. Another rejection, another polite note explaining why she was not what the sender had in mind. Elara set it down with a sigh. Her eyes wandered to the small potted plants on her windowsill. They thrived in the misty air, bending and growing toward the light. She thought about herself in the same way, bending, growing, reaching for something better, even when the world seemed to push her back. Just then, a soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find Marin, her closest friend in the colony. Marin was small, wiry, and full of energy, the kind of person who could slip through tight spaces in the forest with ease. He smiled at her. "Hey, Elara, you okay?" he asked. Elara shrugged. "Another rejection," she admitted. "I don't know why people can't see past this." She gestured to herself, not in anger, but in quiet frustration. Marin shook his head. "It's their loss," he said firmly. "You're amazing, Elara. Strong, smart, and kind. Any person who can't see that doesn't deserve you." Elara smiled faintly. Marion's words warmed her, but they did not erase the ache. She knew he was right. She was proud of who she was. But the loneliness lingered, like a shadow she could not shake. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her small home. The colony was quiet, save for the soft rustling of leaves outside. She thought about the mail order system, about all the people who had judged her without knowing her fully. She thought about the future, whether she would ever find someone who appreciated her as she was, someone who saw her strength as a gift and not a flaw. And she wondered, maybe someone out there would. The very next morning, as the first light of Verdantia's twin suns touched the forest, Elara set out for her daily work in the timber fields. The colony had begun a new logging project. Careful, slow work to avoid damaging the forest while still providing the settlers with needed resources. It was challenging, and many machines struggled with the dense, oddly shaped trees of Verdantia. Elara moved among them, her hands steady, her eyes sharp. She adjusted a pulley here, tightened a cable there. She could hear the sighs of relief from the workers as their machines obeyed her touch. It was satisfying work, but her mind wandered back to the letters on her desk at home and the strange feeling that someone, somewhere, might see her differently. She did not notice the shadow watching from across the clearing. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, moved carefully among the trees. His boots crushed leaves softly, and his eyes followed her movements with a quiet intensity. This man was Brennan, a lumberjack known for his strength and skill in navigating Verdantia's forests. He had heard of Elara, the woman the colony whispered about, the one who was too much for anyone else. Brennan had his own thoughts about the colony's expectations. He had always felt that the settlers placed too much importance on appearances, on polite manners and social norms. Strength, intelligence, adaptability, these were the things that mattered in a world like Verdantia. And as he watched Elara work, moving with both grace and power, he felt a rare sense of admiration. She adjusted a beam, her hands sure and confident. She hummed softly, unaware of the eyes on her from the forest edge. Brennan had seen many workers in his life, but few moved with such combination of mind and body. To him, she was not too much. She was exactly right. Elara finished her work and wiped her hands on her apron. She glanced toward the forest edge, sensing movement, but when she saw nothing, she shrugged and continued on her way. She had no idea that someone had just marked her in their mind as exceptional, someone who would soon change her view of the colony and of herself forever. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light through the mist, Elara felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone would see her not for her size or strength, but for her heart, her mind, and her skill. Maybe someone would finally understand what made her her. And somewhere in the forest, Brennan continued to watch, silent and thoughtful, certain that when their paths finally crossed, it would be a meeting unlike any the colony had seen before. The sun hung high above Verdantia's misty forests, casting soft golden light through the dense canopy. The timber fields stretched endlessly, massive trees bending slightly in the breeze, their leaves whispering secrets to one another. Among the settlers, the air was busy with the sounds of machinery, conversation, and the occasional shout when something heavy toppled or a pulley jammed. Brennan, the lumberjack, moved quietly among the logs, his massive frame blending with the shadows of the forest. His hands were calloused from years of work, his boots thick and sturdy, and his eyes sharp and calculating. He had spent most of his life on Verdantia, learning how to read the trees, the winds, and the soil. He was known for his skill, for solving problems others could not. Yet, he felt something strange stirring in him as he watched Elara from a distance. She was working with a group of apprentices, adjusting a timber pulley that had refused to function for hours. Brennan noticed the way her hands moved with confidence, the way her eyes examined each detail, the way her mind seemed to anticipate every movement the machine might make. Most settlers struggled with the colony's equipment. Elara made it seem effortless. Brennan felt a rare sense of respect and curiosity. He had heard of her from other workers, the misfit bride the colony whispered about, but seeing her in action was different. She was not clumsy or overbearing. She was precise, capable, and confident. Her size, which some had called too much, only added to her strength. Where others faltered under heavy beams or malfunctioning machines, Elara moved with natural authority, bending the environment to her skill without breaking a sweat. He admired her, but not in the way one admires beauty alone. He admired her for her intelligence, her skill, and her quiet determination. It was rare to find someone who could move through Verdantia's challenges with both physical and mental strength. Most settlers focused on one or the other. Elara had mastered both. Brennan approached slowly, careful not to disturb her. He preferred observation before action. He wanted to understand her world before stepping into it. As he watched, Elara paused, noticing a misaligned beam. She adjusted it, humming softly to herself, completely absorbed in her work. Brennan realized something important. The colony had judged her too quickly. They had focused on appearance, on expectations, on what they thought a partner should be. They had ignored her heart, her mind, her unique abilities. And Brennan, who had spent much of his life ignoring expectations, recognized someone who shared his values, someone practical, capable, and strong in ways that truly mattered. He stepped forward then, finally making himself known. "That pulley is giving you trouble?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying authority. Elara looked up, slightly startled. She was not used to strangers approaching while she worked, especially not someone so large and imposing. But something in his voice made her relax. It was not judgmental. It was practical, direct, honest. "Yes," she admitted, wiping her hands on her apron. "It won't stay aligned no matter how I adjust it. The apprentices can't figure it out either." Brennan nodded and stepped closer. He examined the pulley system with her, his fingers moving over the mechanisms as easily as if he had designed them himself. "You're overthinking it," he said finally, a small smile on his face. "It's the angle of the support beam. Once you shift it a bit, the tension will balance. The machine will run smoothly." Elara studied his hands as they adjusted the beam. He moved with confidence, but he also watched her reactions, as if he valued her input. That was unusual. Most people assumed they knew best, and few asked for advice or collaboration. But Brennan included her. He adjusted the beam, then stepped back, waiting for her response. She tested the pulley. It hummed to life immediately. The apprentices clapped softly, amazed, but Elara only smiled faintly. She looked at Brennan, and for the first time, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long while. Recognition. Not just acknowledgement of skill, but genuine respect. "Impressive," she said, her voice soft but sincere. He shrugged modestly. "We all have our strengths," he replied. "Sometimes, it just takes the right eyes to see them." Elara felt warmth in her chest. No one had ever said that to her in such a simple, honest way. Most had only focused on her size, her strength, or her differences. But Brennan had seen past all of that. He had seen her. For the next few days, their paths crossed repeatedly. Verdantia was a demanding place, and the timber fields required constant attention. Each day, Elara and Brennan worked side by side, sometimes in silence, sometimes exchanging ideas. She discovered that he was not only strong, but clever, capable of improvising solutions that machines alone could not achieve. He noticed how precise and thoughtful she was, how she combined knowledge and experience in ways that made difficult tasks appear effortless. Slowly, a bond began to form. They began to trust each other in the way people do when facing challenges together. And while no one in the colony had expected them to meet, it seemed inevitable that two humans with similar values, ingenuity, resilience, and practical skill, would recognize something special in one another. One afternoon, as Verdantia's twin suns cast long shadows through the trees, a problem arose. A massive timber beam had become stuck between two supports, threatening to block an entire section of the logging site. The apprentices panicked. Machines groaned and squealed under the strain. Settlers ran back and forth, unsure what to do. Elara and Brennan exchanged a glance. Without words, they knew what to do. They moved together, combining strength, precision, and quick thinking. Brennan lifted one end of the beam, his muscles straining but steady. Elara calculated the angles, directing him to shift slightly, guiding him with her knowledge of physics and mechanics. The beam moved smoothly into place. The machines resumed operation. The apprentices breathed sighs of relief, and the colony quieted, awed by what two humans could achieve when they worked in harmony. After the work was done, they walked together through the forest, their steps calm and synchronized. Brennan looked at Elara, not with admiration alone, but with something deeper: curiosity, respect, and the recognition that she was someone who could match him in skill, intellect, and heart. "You know," he said casually, "most people in the colony would never see you this way. They focus on size, or what they think someone should look like. They don't see the person inside." Elara smiled faintly. "I've learned to expect that," she replied, "but it still hurts sometimes. To be judged for things I cannot change, it can be lonely." Brennan nodded. "I get that. I've spent my life ignoring what people thought I should do or be. They didn't understand me. But that doesn't mean someone won't. You just have to find the right person, someone who sees what really matters." Elara looked at him, and for the first time, she wondered if perhaps the right person was closer than she had imagined. She had spent months feeling rejected and unseen, but here was someone who valued her for exactly who she was, Not for appearances, not for expectations, but for her skill, her mind, and her heart. The day ended with them walking back toward the settlement, their shadows stretching long over the forest floor. The mist clung to the ground, curling around their feet. Birds called softly in the trees, and the distant hum of machinery marked the rhythm of life on Verdantia. Elara felt a flicker of hope. She did not know what the future held, or how her relationship with Brennan would develop, but for the first time in a long while, she felt that maybe, just maybe, there was someone who would truly see her. And Brennan, walking beside her, felt something rare as well. He had spent his life valuing skill and heart above all else, and now he had found someone who matched him in both. He knew the colony might not understand, and others might still whisper about Elara's size or strength, but he didn't care. To him, she was perfect, and in a place where survival depended on ingenuity and resilience, that was exactly what mattered most. That evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the forest in golden and orange hues, Brennan and Elara stood near the edge of the clearing. The world was alive with possibilities. They didn't know what challenges the future might bring, but they knew one thing. Together, they could face anything. Elara looked at Brennan and smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached her eyes. He smiled back, and in that simple exchange, a quiet understanding passed between them. They were not just two humans in a sprawling, distant colony. They were allies, partners, and perhaps something more. Two people who had found recognition, respect, and hope in each other, even in a world that often misunderstood them. And somewhere deep in the forest, the trees seemed to whisper in approval, their leaves rustling softly, as if welcoming the bond that had formed between two exceptional humans. The morning on Verdantia began like any other, with mist curling over the timber fields and twin suns slowly rising above the dense forest canopy. Settlers moved about their daily tasks, adjusting pulleys, repairing equipment, and checking the stability of the massive timber structures that sustained the colony. Life was busy, orderly, and often unpredictable, but no one anticipated the challenge that would arrive that day. Elara awoke to the faint rumble of the ground. She paused, listening. It was subtle at first, barely more than a vibration under her feet, but growing steadily louder. Something deep within the planet shifted. Verdantia was prone to tremors, but this was stronger than any she had felt before. She dressed quickly, her hands steady and sure despite the rising tension in her chest. She knew the timber fields would be at risk. Machines could fail, beams could collapse, and apprentices might be trapped under falling logs. The safety of the colony depended on quick thinking and decisive action, qualities that humans alone could provide. By the time she reached the central timber area, the tremors had intensified. Machines groaned under stress, pulleys swung dangerously, and the massive timber beams that formed the colony's framework creaked ominously. Apprentices and settlers scrambled, some shouting, some frozen in fear. Brennan was already there, his large frame moving confidently among the chaos. He had noticed the tremors earlier while inspecting the logging equipment, and his instincts told him that human skill would be needed more than ever. He met Elara's gaze across the field, and a silent understanding passed between them. "No machines can handle this," Brennan said, his voice steady above the rising rumble. "We have to do it ourselves." Elara nodded. "Then let's move quickly." They worked together immediately, coordinating with precision. The colony's apprentices followed their directions, guided by clear, calm instructions rather than panic. Brennan lifted massive beams to relieve pressure on weak supports, his strength allowing him to act where machines would have failed. Elara calculated angles, directed movements, and reinforced structures with improvisation only humans could manage. The tremors grew stronger, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Some settlers stumbled, but Elara and Brennan moved among them with assurance, helping those who faltered and directing others to safer positions. Each beam they shifted, each pulley they adjusted, reduced the risk of a collapse. "What about the central support?" one apprentice shouted. Elara glanced toward the massive central beam that held the heart of the timber field together. Its supports were cracking under the tremors, and failure would send the entire structure tumbling. "We have to stabilize it manually," she replied without hesitation. Brennan's eyes met hers. "I'll lift the beam. You guide me." Working in perfect synchronization, Brennan braced himself under the massive timber while Elara measured angles and instructed him on precise shifts. With incredible effort, they managed to balance the weight long enough for her to secure temporary supports. The apprentices gasped, amazed at the display of teamwork and skill. As the tremors continued, it became clear that this was not a simple quake. The planet's crust had shifted deeper than expected, affecting not only the timber fields, but also the colony's energy and water systems. Machines designed to stabilize the logs and provide essential services began to fail. Alarms blared and lights flickered. Settlers panicked. Elara and Brennan didn't hesitate. They moved from one problem to another, assessing damage, improvising solutions, and guiding others. While machines failed under stress, human ingenuity thrived. Elara used her engineering knowledge to redirect energy flow, allowing temporary operation of the essential systems. Brennan reinforced beams, shifted timber, and organized volunteers to prevent accidents. For hours, they worked in harmony. Sweat poured down their faces, their muscles ached, but neither faltered. The tremors continued, relentless, yet the colony remained standing. Not because of machinery, but because of human skill, determination, and adaptability. At one point, a massive beam threatened to crush an apprentice trapped underneath. Elara calculated the exact leverage needed, instructing Brennan to lift the beam just enough for the apprentice to escape. With careful precision, they executed the plan, saving the young worker without injury. The apprentices watched, wide-eyed, realizing that human courage and intelligence were the colony's true strength. When the tremors finally began to subside, a tense silence fell over the timber fields. Settlers checked on one another, assessing damage. Amazingly, no major collapses had occurred. Machines were broken, but humans had compensated, and the timber fields remained largely intact. Elara and Brennan stood together in the clearing, breathing heavily but proud. Their clothes were dirty, their hands scratched, but their spirits were unbroken. Around them, the apprentices and settlers looked on with a newfound respect. "You too," one apprentice began. "You saved the field, you saved us." Elara shook her head. "We all did it together. We just needed to think clearly and work with what we had." Brennan smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Humans have a way of solving problems machines can't. Sometimes the tools fail and the code breaks, but people, we adapt. That's our advantage." Elara felt a sense of pride swelling inside her. For the first time, the colony had seen her not as too much or unusual, but as capable, intelligent, and essential. And beside her stood someone who had recognized that truth from the very beginning. As the settlers began to clean up and repair the minor damage, Brennan and Elara walked together through the timber fields. The ground was still trembling slightly, a reminder that Verdantia was unpredictable. But the immediate danger had passed. "You know," Brennan said casually, "I've worked on this planet for years. I've lifted logs heavier than anything most people could imagine. I've fixed machines no one else could, but I've never worked with someone like you. You think differently. You see angles, weight, and timing in a way that complements me perfectly." Elara smiled faintly. "I could say the same about you. You're strong, yes, but you also pay attention. You listen and adjust. That's rare here," Brennan nodded. "It's not just rare, it's what keeps us alive." They walked in silence for a few moments, letting the weight of their shared experience sink in. The forest around them was calm now, birds returning to the trees, leaves rustling softly in the gentle wind. Verdantia had tested them, and humans had proven their worth, not through technology alone, but through intelligence, skill, and cooperation. Elara thought about the mail-order letters she had received months ago. How small and insignificant they now seemed compared to what she had just experienced. The colony's rejection, the whispers about her size and strength, all of it faded in the face of real achievement. She had contributed to the survival of an entire community, and her abilities, the very things others had scorned, had made the difference. Brennan watched her quietly, a sense of admiration growing stronger with each passing moment. He had always believed that human strength and ingenuity were unmatched, but seeing it in action with someone like Elara had confirmed it. And beyond skill and intelligence, he had noticed her heart, patient, thoughtful, and brave. She wasn't just capable, she was exceptional. As evening approached, the settlers gathered in the central clearing, exhausted but relieved. Leaders gave instructions for repairs, and apprentices worked under guidance to restore normal function. Amid the chatter and activity, Elara and Brennan stood slightly apart, their attention on one another rather than the busy colony. "You did well today," Brennan said quietly, almost to himself, better than anyone could have imagined. Elara smiled, a little shyly. "We did it together, you and I." He nodded. Yes, together. There was a quiet understanding between them, something deeper than friendship or respect. It was recognition. That in a place where humans were often underestimated, they had proven themselves in the most difficult way possible. And in that recognition, a bond began to form, strong and steady, like the beams they had fought to save. As the twin suns set, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold, the colony seemed smaller and safer, the forest calmer, and the world full of possibilities. Elara realized that her size, her strength, her intelligence, all the things she had once thought were flaws, were exactly what made her valuable. And Brennan, standing beside her, seemed to understand that better than anyone. For the first time in a long while, She felt truly seen, and for the first time she allowed herself to hope, not just for recognition, but for connection, partnership, and something more. Together, they had faced Verdantia's wrath, and together they had succeeded. And the future, unpredictable as it was, suddenly seemed full of promise. The days after Verdantia's tremors were busy, but full of purpose. Settlers moved through the timber fields with renewed confidence, guided by the lessons of the recent crisis. Machines had been repaired, supports reinforced, and the apprentices worked with a new sense of determination. But amidst all the activity, two people moved together quietly, carrying the memory of what they had accomplished. Ilara woke early, as she always did, and stepped outside her small home. Mist curled over the forest floor, and the twin suns peeked over the horizon. She inhaled deeply, feeling the crisp air fill her lungs. There was a sense of calm now, a rare moment after the chaos of the tremors. But more than calm, there was a sense of possibility. She had survived, she had contributed, and she had discovered a strength she hadn't fully believed in before. Brennan was already waiting for her at the edge of the clearing. He had been watching the sunrise, as he often did, but now his gaze shifted when he saw her approach. The sight of her walking toward him, steady and confident, made him smile, not because of appearances, but because of what she represented: capability, courage, and the kind of human spirit that made Verdantia survivable, even remarkable. "Morning," he said softly, his voice calm against the quiet of the forest. "Morning," she replied, a small smile forming on her lips. She noticed the way his eyes seemed to see her fully. Not her size, not her strength, not the labels others had placed upon her, but her mind, her heart, and her resilience. It was a rare and powerful thing. They walked together through the timber fields, passing settlers who were still repairing minor damage from the tremors. Apprentices waved and called out greetings, their faces bright with newfound confidence. Ilara realized that the colony had changed slightly, not because of machines or technology, but because of what humans could do when they worked together. Brennan noticed her gaze lingering on a partially repaired pulley. "You're thinking about improvements," he said, guessing correctly. "I am," Ilara admitted. "We can make this safer and faster. If another tremor happens, the machines will still work and fewer people will be at risk." He nodded, impressed. "You're always thinking ahead. That's why you were perfect for this challenge. Not just strong, but clever." Ilara felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she didn't feel like a misfit. She felt seen, truly seen, and standing beside her was someone who valued her completely. As they walked deeper into the timber fields, a messenger approached. "Ilara, Brennan," he called, slightly out of breath. "The colony leaders want to see you. They want to recognize what you did during the tremors." Ilara exchanged a glance with Brennan. Neither had sought praise. Their focus had been on survival and solutions, but the acknowledgement felt meaningful. It was the colony finally seeing what they had always ignored: human ingenuity, resilience, and collaboration. They followed the messenger to the central gathering area. Settlers had gathered there, buzzing with excitement and respect. Colony leaders, usually reserved and formal, stepped forward with smiles. "Ilara," one leader began, "Brennan, the colony owes you both a great deal. When the tremors struck, the machines failed. Many of us would have been trapped, injured, or worse, but you acted quickly, calmly, and wisely. You used your skills, your minds, and your strength to save lives and protect the colony. We are grateful." Applause filled the clearing. Ilara felt a blush rise to her cheeks, but it wasn't embarrassment. It was the quiet satisfaction of being recognized for who she truly was. She glanced at Brennan, who gave her a small nod and smile. They had faced the tremors together, and now the colony had witnessed the human advantage in action. After the recognition, the colony began a celebration of sorts. Food was prepared, music filled the air, and settlers shared stories of the day's events. Ilara and Brennan stood slightly apart, observing quietly, enjoying the energy without needing to be at the center of it. Brennan turned to her. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I've spent years in these forests, lifting logs heavier than anything most people could imagine. I've fixed machines that no one else could. But I've never worked with someone like you. You think in ways I don't. You see solutions I can't. You complete the work in a way that makes everything stronger, safer, better." Ilara felt her heart quicken. She had never heard anyone describe her this way. Not as an object of pity, not as someone to be judged, but as a partner. Equal in skill, equal in heart, equal in purpose. "And you," she replied softly, "don't just rely on strength. You listen, adjust, and guide. You don't just act, you think. That's rare here, and it's why we succeeded together." Brennan's smile widened. Then I guess we make a good team. Elara nodded, laughing lightly. The best team, I'd say. For a moment, they stood in silence, letting the celebration continue around them. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows through the timber fields. Birds called softly, returning to their nests after a long day. The forest seemed calmer, almost approving, as if acknowledging the partnership that had formed. Brennan reached out, gently taking her hand. It was not an impulsive gesture, not a show of dominance, but a quiet acknowledgement of connection. Elara felt the warmth of his hand, the steady reassurance of someone who had seen her completely and valued her for it. You're remarkable, Elara, he said softly. Not just for what you did, but for who you are. And I want you to know. I see you, fully. All of you. Elara's eyes softened. She had spent so long hiding behind polite smiles, expecting rejection, imagining that no one could see her worth. But here was someone who did. Brennan's words were simple, honest, and full of respect. She felt a thrill of hope, and perhaps something more. Thank you, Brennan, she replied, her voice steady but warm. I see you too. Not just your strength, but your heart and your mind. You value things that matter, and that makes you rare. He squeezed her hand gently. Then maybe we can face the future together. Not just surviving, but thriving together. Elara smiled, the feeling of recognition and connection settling deep within her. She had found someone who didn't see her size or strength as a problem, but as part of her, as part of what made her ideal, capable, and extraordinary. Over the next days, the colony continued to recover. Apprentices learned from both Elara and Brennan, understanding that human skill and ingenuity were the true foundation of survival on Verdantia. Stories of the tremors spread, not as tales of fear, but as demonstrations of human capability. Settlers whispered about how 2 humans had saved the timber fields, proving that strength, intelligence, and courage were more powerful than any machine. Elara and Brennan, meanwhile, continued to work together. Their bond deepened with every shared challenge and solution. They laughed together, planned together, and explored the forests, learning from each other. Their connection was quiet but strong, rooted in respect, trust, and mutual admiration. One evening, as the twin suns set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and pink, Elara and Brennan stood atop a small hill overlooking the timber fields. The colony below was alive with light and movement, but up here, everything was calm. You know, Elara said, I never thought anyone would see me for who I really am. Not my size, not my strength, not the things that make me, me. Brennan looked at her, his eyes steady. I did. I always did. And I'm glad I got to show you that someone can see you fully and still want to be with you, respect you, partner with you. Elara felt a rush of gratitude and warmth. She had spent so long feeling like an outsider, but now she understood something profound. Human connection was not about appearances or expectations or labels. It was about recognition, understanding, and partnership. And in Brennan, she had found someone who understood exactly that. They stood side by side, hands intertwined, watching the suns disappear behind the forest canopy. The wind whispered through the trees, and the colony below glowed with the quiet triumph of human skill and resilience. Elara realized that she was no longer the misfit the colony had whispered about. She was a hero, not because of size alone, but because of courage, intelligence, and heart. And beside her stood someone who valued every part of her, strength, mind, and spirit. In that moment, she allowed herself to hope for the future, a future where humans could not only survive, but thrive. A future where partnership, respect, and ingenuity were celebrated. And a future where she and Brennan could face the challenges of Verdantia together. The forest seemed to breathe around them, alive with possibility. The hum of life, the rustling of leaves, and the quiet strength of the planet reminded them both that survival was not about fear or strength alone, but about courage, partnership, and the uniquely human ability to adapt and overcome. And so, as night fell over Verdantia, Elara and Brennan stood together hand in hand, ready to face whatever the world might bring, knowing that in each other they had found something rare, powerful, and enduring.
In a colony where humans were often underestimated, they had proven the truth. Humans were strong not just in body, but in mind, heart, and spirit.
And sometimes recognition and connection could be the greatest triumph of all.